Today I want to talk about the AlphaPix 4 and the AlphaPix 16 general configuration and the differences between both controllers. Let's take a look at the specs. The AlphaPix 4 is about $110 via Holiday Coro, and the Pix 16 is $175. These costs do not include any warranties. You can purchase them without. If you are new to this, I definitely recommend purchasing the warranty. Your total cost with the warranty for the Pix 4 would be $130 or $200 for the Pix 16. The Pix 4 comes with 4 ports versus the Pix 16 that has 16 ports. The amps per port is different between these two. If you are using more pixels per port, the amps per port is different between the Pix 4 and the Pix 16. If you are a beginner and do not want to have to deal with power injection, this is an option you can use depending on the controller. So the Pix 4 is 7.5 amps per port. The Pix 16 is 5. If we take a look over here in the right hand side, you'll notice we have a quick little sheet that shows you have 12 volts pixel string. It's 45 milliamps per LED pixel. So there's 3 LEDs per pixel. All 3 LEDs combined is 45 milliamps. Your pixel count is 100, which gives you 4.5 amps per 100 pixels. This fits nicely into a Pix 16 or a Pix 4. If you were to change that to 150 pixels, you're going to hit right around 7 amps per port for a 150 pixel string. So there is an advantage of the Pix 4 if you're going to use less ports. You just need something that has more pixels per port for the amperage without doing power injection. That is a benefit. Your max universes. This is also important. Max universe is 4 on the Pix 4 and 2 on the Pix 16. Your max channels per port is 2048 on the Pix 4 and 1024 on the Pix 16. Your max pixels per port is 680 on the Pix 4 because each pixel is 3 channels. The Pix 4 does allow you to have 682 channels, but that math doesn't go into 3, so you actually have to go down to 680 pixels. Same thing with the Pix 16. I believe off the top of my head it's 340 pixels per port. Your total pixel count per controller is 2,730 on the Pix 4 and 5,461 on the Pix 16. Again, those numbers will be slightly off because they are divisible by 3 because each pixel has 3 LEDs per pixel. If you wanted to break down the cost per pixel on the controller board, you can get 4 cents per pixel usage on the Pix 4 and 3.2 cents on the Pix 16. You're going to look at it at a cost per port basis. It's $27.50 per port on your Pix 4, and your Pix 16 is roughly $11. Another big difference on the Pix 4 versus 16 is the Pix 4 has 1 DMX port and the Pix 16 has 3. These DMX serial ports are often good for legacy equipment like LOR operating in DMX mode or other DMX serial controllers that you can daisy chain. The duty cycle on these are both 20%, so they assume that 20% of the time these will be active. The rest of the 80%, lights will not be active or running at full power. Alright, let's take a look at the configuration for an AlphaPix 16. Starting at the top, it's going to tell you the type of controller, if it's a 4-port or 16-port. It's also going to tell you what your current IP address is. Something to note about the configuration in the AlphaPix is everything that's surrounded in a solid lined box. That config is only applied when setting the set button in that box for that configuration. So if you were to make a change for the device name, it will not change anything to do with the password or IP address. So in the About section, you have your device ID and your device name. I recommend using the device name as something useful to you that you can document in a spreadsheet or something simple you can put onto a map of your house for the location of this controller. Once you make your desired change, click the Set button. Let's move on to the password section. This controller does not come with a password set by default. If you would like to set a password, in the current password box, leave it blank. Then you have your new password and your confirm password boxes. Put your desired password in both of these boxes and click the Set button. If you wish to change your password, put your current password in the current password box and your new password in the below two boxes and click on the Set button. I always recommend setting a password if all possible. It just keeps the honest and anybody from making changes just out of spite. Next, you have the IP address section. You have two forms of IP addresses. One, you have a DHCP, which is where your router assigns you an IP address to the controller. The other option is static. This is where you manually set the IP address of your controller based on your current network that your router has, and this IP address will not change unless you change it in these settings below. Feel free to check the links below on IP address subnetting. Once you make your desired change, update the IP address information button and the controller will reset. Next, you're going to have your DMX input signal. This is going to be one of two different protocols. Your E131, which is DMX over Ethernet. And then you also have AirNet. Majority of the time you're going to be using E131. The next section is going to be color order. RGB or BGR. Generally you're going to use RGB, which is red, green, and blue. The next section is going to be SPI output configuration. This is where you're going to be specifying what physical port has what universe and how many pixels. This is very important. This must match up with your sequencing software, so your output player has the right universes for the right IP addresses with the right amount of pixels. In the controller, if you specify 50 pixels for port 1, universe 5, and you have 100 pixels, the first 50 pixels will work, the remaining 50 will not. So we'll just kind of cover a couple ports in here on the configuration. We'll take a look at the configuration on a couple of ports that I have. Currently, port number 1 is universe 5. The start DMX channel is 1 with 170 pixels connected. The light intensity limit, the max power per string, is at 60%. Generally, you want to leave this at 100% as a new user or beginner. As you become an advanced user, you will find reasons to change this to a lesser value to prevent overdriving or overutilization of amperage per controller, and kind of prevents you from damaging the controller. As you notice, as we go down to the ports, they increment by 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then we jump to 14. This gives me the ability to use 2 universes on one port. All I would have to do is adjust the pixel count to the proper pixels used if I were to ever increase for more than one universe. Generally, you do not want to limit yourself to one universe per port. If you think you're ever going to need more pixels per port, try to plan ahead. This prevents you from having to make a bunch of changes in your sequencing software and controller. Alright, moving on to the serial outputs, which are your DMX output ports. The Pix 16 has 3 ports. Generally, they're going to come disabled. If you want them enabled, click on the enable button, specify your universe, and click the set button. Again, this is only for this output, port number 1. If you decide to enable all 3 and click the set button, it's only going to apply the settings for port number 1. Each DMX port will only do one universe, so make sure that you have universes assigned correctly. You also have a pixel protocol output configuration. This controller will do WS2811, 2801, and a variety of other protocols. 9 times out of 10 you're going to be using your 2811, but check your pixels and make sure you're using the right protocol, make the proper setting, and click your set button to save the configuration. Pixel chip order. This is going to be generally RGB. Make your selection and click the set button. This will make a difference if you're enabling any test modes in the controller. It will assume that the first channel of every pixel is red, the second is green, the third is blue. In this scenario, if you have RGB selected, the first color that comes on is green, then you know that you need to select something starting with a G, and then see what your second and third color is, because your string may be green, red, blue, rather than red, green, blue. Make your desired setting and click your set button. There is an option of a backlight on the controller. This allows you to brighten or dim the backlight. Make your setting that you wish with the slider and click the update backlight settings button to save the settings. The AlphaPix controllers 4 and 16 both have a shutdown temperature. Pick your selected temperature you wish for the controller to shut down at and click the update button. Fan temperature trigger. There's a fan port on the AlphaPix 4 and 16 controller that you can add a fan to that will allow you to turn the fan on and off based on the controller's temperature. Pick your desired temperature. I'd recommend, if you don't want the controller to get to 100 degrees, have the fan turn on at 80 or 85 until it gets down to 80 or such degrees, that'll turn off. And just as a note, they have it here on the bottom, fan will turn on at the temperature listed above and turn off after dropping 10 degrees below the listed temperature. So if you have the temperature set for 80 degrees, the fan will not turn off until it hits 70. Make your desired selection and click on the update fan trigger button. The last option is firmware update. The currently installed firmware on this controller is 2.08, which is back in July of 2016. There is, I believe, one other version that is out that enables test patterns to be enabled remotely. This controller does not have it, but generally it's, I believe, at the top above the SPI Pixel menu. So generally, there's no need to upgrade firmware unless you have an issue, or if there's a feature set that you want, then I would recommend updating. Again, if you're going to update the firmware, do not update it just prior to Christmas or whenever you're going to have your show. Do it in advance. Do it weeks or months in advance. That way you can test it. You can find out if there's any bugs with it. And if there is, you can always roll back. You don't want to be troubleshooting this in the middle of Christmas or Halloween or whatever event or show you're doing, and then have to also troubleshoot firmware on top of some other issue with sequencing or any electrical challenges you may be having. So this is an overview of the Pix 4 and Pix 16 configuration menu. If you have any questions, put them below. Thank you.